On the Build Show today, we're talking insulation. What insulation to use in the different parts of your house, whether it's the exterior, the walls, the ceiling joists. There's a lot of options out there. We're also going to take a deep dive into Rockwool. What are its benefits and why you might want to use that compared to some other insulation options out there. Today's video is sponsored by Rockwool. Let's get going. All right, so when I say the word insulation, typically you're going to assume I'm talking about thermal resistance, right? The ability to resist the flow of heat from the outside to the inside. But really, there's so many other things that insulation can do and should do for you in your house. And that's why specifically I've used a lot of Rockwool over the years and why I really like it. Now, let's talk about, before we get into where to use it and how to use it, let's talk about a few advantages that Rockwool has over some other things. There's really 8 things that I like about Rockwool. Number one, of course, thermal resistance, right? All these products are going to resist the flow of heat from one place to another. But the next most important thing behind that I really like about Rockwool is its fire resistance. Now, I've done some demos before on this, and you should check out my old videos. This is a really impressive product when it comes to fire resistance. This is really its kingpin, the thing that makes it so different from the rest of the insulations out there. This can withstand temps greater than 1800 degrees Fahrenheit, and when you use it in various places in the house, it's going to add additional fire resistance to your structure. This is a really big deal. Now, in particular, Comfort Board, which is the outside insulation, can be used in a wildfire urban interface area, WUI, to give the overall house fire resistance from the outside. But you're also going to see later in the video how we're going to use some of their other products like Safe and Sound for fire resistance inside the house. Number 3, acoustic capabilities. Again, this is a killer benefit of Rockwool compared to traditional insulations. It's much more dense, and as a result, it's really going to do a great job of stopping sound transmission. Now, if you've ever been to a builder show like the International Builder Show, Rockwool builds a tunnel, a U-shaped tunnel, no door at either end, and all they do is insulate this tunnel, the stud wall, with Rockwool bats in the walls and in the ceiling. And when you go into the center of that U, you are going to be shocked by how quiet it is there. It really does a great job of knocking down sound transmission. Number 4, water repellency. This is especially important on the outside of the house when you're using Comfort Board. This is a hydrophobic product, meaning it's afraid of water, and if you see water go on it, it just runs like water off a duck's back. You can see it's not soaking in. Traditional insulations tend to soak up like a sponge. This is going to run off. It's not going to soak in. Number 5, this is made from recycled material. In fact, one of the big ingredients for this is slag, which is why you call it mineral wool or stone wool. This is left over from the steel industry, and so you've got a great recycled content from this. There's a really good green story behind this. Next up, it's dimensionally stable. Compared to other insulations, especially foam insulations, which tend to shrink over time, this is much more dimensionally stable. And then another big deal, especially when we're talking about the outside of the house, is that this is a vapor permeable or a vapor open insulation. If you're in a cold climate, you're going to use a vapor permeable house wrap on the outside of the house. You also want a vapor permeable insulation. So for instance, when I went to Vancouver recently and saw those builders in that very cold climate, everybody was using Comfort Board in that climate zone, and that's a great place to use this because we want to be able to drive through to the outside in the wintertime in a cold climate. And lastly, there's some new research coming out that insects will not tunnel through this. So if you're using Comfort Board, for instance, on the outside, you don't have to worry about bugs tunneling through it like you would in a traditional foam insulation on the outside. All right, next let's talk about the different options and where to use it. Now, if you look at their website, they have a great website, by the way. Definitely worth getting on there for some case studies and some also amazing diagrams of wall assemblies, where to use it, how to use it. But let me give you the brief overview. There's basically 3 products that you're going to see on their website. Comfort Bat, first of all. That's this right behind me. This is a 2x4 framed house, 16-inch on center, and these Comfort Bats, which are R15, very high insulation value for that small amount of space, are super easy to install in there. You're going to cut it with basically a bread knife, just like you'd buy at the grocery store. A serrated knife works well. Or this is an insulation knife that can be resharpened, and it cuts super easily. You really just need gloves and some long sleeves and you're good to go. Okay, now when it comes to comfort bat, you can get in all the flavors and options you want. 2x4, 2x6 construction, 16-inch or 24-inch centers. So that's your exterior walls. Now, another product that's really a big deal for builders like me is Safe and Sound. This is a product that's not necessarily intended for thermal resistance, although it does have some. You won't find an R value on the bag. It's intended for two things: safety, specifically fire safety, and sound transmission. Now you want to use this on your interior walls, your interior partitions, like between your master bedroom and the rooms next door. Perfect place to insulate. Between your laundry room, between your kids' bedrooms and bathrooms. Those are all walls that you're going to want to insulate for sound purposes. But this also has some fire resistance capabilities, and this is a big deal. You know, there's builders all over the nation that are using I-joists for their first floor, and in their basement, traditionally they'll deliver the basement to the client unfinished, that they might finish it later. And for years, builders didn't have to do anything for fire resistance there, but codes have changed. As of the 2012 codes, you need to insulate, especially those I-joists, with something that's going to keep fire resistance down. And really about your best option out there, and one of the only options, is Rockwool's Safe and Sound bats. Again, you can get this in different sizes, 24 or 16-inch on centers. Very easy to install. You're going to use a metal wire to hold it in place. And then once those bats are in the ceiling down there, now we've got a rated assembly. Now check with your local codes. You may or may not have to add drywall on top of that for extra fire resistance. But what it's doing basically is it's going to protect the web, that OSB half-inch web on those I-joists, from fire damaging those and making that structure crumble if you had a fire. It's going to give you a longer amount of time before that floor assembly is going to want to crumble in fire. So Safe and Sound, that's going to be used on the interior of the house, between floors and between rooms. Now lastly, let's talk comfort board. Now I mentioned a couple of big deals about this, and why you see it used so much is because it's vapor open. This is a perfect exterior insulation to use. Now it's a little more dense than other insulations. That's why they also sell it in these 2-foot by 4-foot sections, so you can handle it a little bit easier. But you can see this 2-inch Comfort Board 80 is going to give you R8 on the outside of the building. So this is a perfect use to wrap your building. And as I mentioned, I saw that all over the place in Vancouver. Some builders just using a couple inches, and some builders getting really thick with their exterior insulation. You know, my friend Joe Stiebrick says, don't eat your sweater, wear your sweater. And what he's talking about is this insulation is good here, but every time we've got a stud here, we've got a thermal bridge. We've got a place that heat is conducted through more easily than this area. So by wrapping your building with comfort board on the outside of the house, you're really going to stop that heat transmission, and it's going to really increase your overall thermal resistance of your walls. Guys, thanks for joining me on this deep dive on insulation, and specifically the advantages that Rockwool has over a lot of insulation options in the marketplace. Now, stay tuned for future information on this topic. I've got some California builders that have really had to change their practices over the last 10 years based on that WUI, that wildland urban interface. We're going to do some videos on that later in the year. I also have a bunch of old Rockwool videos that are still applicable today. I'll put a playlist on Rockwool down in the description below. And as I mentioned, go to their website. They really have a terrific website with lots of good details and case studies worth going to. Now, if you're not currently a subscriber to The Build Show, hit that subscribe button below. We've got new content here on YouTube every Tuesday and every Friday. And oh, by the way, if you don't know, I started my own network. BuildShowNetwork.com has several other like-minded builders and an architect, Steve Basic, posting one new video a week. So we actually have 6 new videos every single week. Click the link in the description below to sign up for our weekly newsletter so you know what's new on BuildShowNetwork.com. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, otherwise we'll see you next time on The Build Show.